Hello fellow World of Warcraft fans, welcome back to a new video on my channel. Blizzard has been active in the video game industry for over 30 years and has gained recognition through games like World of Warcraft, Diablo, Warcraft, of course StarCraft, and everything else that comes with it. But now there's a pretty hard blow for Blizzard because they have been convicted and have to pay a $3.5 million fine. And the whole thing is related to loot boxes. What this case is about, I'll show you in this video. Feel free to write your opinion about the topic in the comments. It's always a bit, well, how should I put it? Loot boxes are a difficult topic, let's put it that way. And let's get started with the video. Leave a like, subscribe if you want to support me, and let's go. This whole thing was a verdict. It was a verdict by a judge in Brazil, and the verdict was reached at the end of last week, or rather, I read the article about it on Saturday. In the end, it's about Blizzard selling loot boxes to minors in the games Hearthstone, Overwatch, and in 4 Call of Duty games. In the end, that's what's interesting. This verdict doesn't just affect Blizzard, but also other companies like Riot, Tencent, Apple, Microsoft, and so on. And in total, these companies were fined $65 million altogether. And out of that, 3 million go to Blizzard. In the end, there are now 4 obligations that Blizzard and these other companies have to fulfill. The penalty payments have to be paid into a public youth defense fund. So in the end, it's basically a pool of money that, as I understand it, is then used for the protection and education of young people and minors. Otherwise, the affected minors covered by the ruling must be compensated. It looks like this. Of course, there weren't thousands of minors sitting there in the dock, right? But those who are affected, basically minors who bought loot boxes, can now come forward. And they can assert their claims with Blizzard. That is evident from this ruling. So overall, it means there's no specific value that was determined. But now people can contact Blizzard and see, as I understand it, what they can get out of it. Otherwise, the mentioned games, so Hearthstone, Overwatch, and Call of Duty, have to be changed within the next 90 days. And Blizzard is obligated to pass this verdict on to their audience, to their public, both on social media and in the games. So in the end, this will affect us less. But I think that in the affected country, so in Brazil, this has to be recorded in some form in the game. And yeah, what can I say? I'll just show you a few clips from 2 streamers who are really gambling hard in Hearthstone and Overwatch. It was never something for me, but if you don't know it, Hearthstone is a card game where you can buy packs. And you basically have to buy them to get better cards and build your deck. I don't even want to get into how important this concept is or how pay to win it is. Or whether I can play good decks as a free-to-play player. I only played Itch once in the Inzoth expansion. I didn't spend any money then, and honestly, I managed quite well. But who knows if that's still the case nowadays. All in all, as I already mentioned, Blizzard now has to make changes in its games, and the judge is demanding point 1. When loot boxes are purchased, the users of the game now have to be warned. So you can't just, I don't know, throw in 50 euros and just open the packs like crazy, Klopta. Instead, it now has to say, hey, this is gambling, this is RNG, and it has to clearly state that this is forbidden for minors. And I'm curious to see how this whole thing develops, especially the topic of loot boxes, FIFA packs, whatever, is also pretty big in the Netherlands. There could be rulings in the future that might hit these publishers even harder, but let's wait and see how that turns out. Also, every loot box will have to show the exact odds of getting a specific item in the future. So, like in NBA 2K, for example, it does show percentages, but it only says that your chance of getting one of the best players is less than 1%. But what does that actually mean? That's not clearly defined. Under 1 could mean 0.99, but it could also mean 0.0001. And yeah, you see, there's still a lot of wiggle room. Blizzard needs to be clearer about things like this in the future, even though I wasn't referring to them specifically here, right? But Blizzard needs to clearly define things like this in the future. So that means also in Overwatch, where you get skins, weapon skins, and other stuff. You can see it here too. The player just keeps spending, opening one pack, one loot box after another. In the future, there would have to be a warning in the respective country, and it would have to say, hey, the odds of getting a legendary skin are such and such. Change number 3, age verification. So in the end, Blizzard is obligated, the odds of getting skins are such and such. 3, age verification. What they called robust age verification needs to be implemented. So not like on Pornhub, or so I've heard from a friend, where it just asks, are you already 18? You click yes, and that's the end of the verification. I think something like that wouldn't be allowed here. And at the same time, Blizzard is only allowed to collect the absolute minimum amount of data. That's important too. They're not allowed to use this as a way to get data from their customers and buyers. And in the end, there have to be refunds. So in addition to these compensations, those measures also have to be put in place at the same time. Or if a child has now bought loot boxes for 100 euros, the parents whose children bought them without their permission have to get the money back. So in other words, the whole thing could get much more expensive. They have to pay the 3.5 million, but as I said, they also have to pay for the damages caused, meaning they have to reimburse the parents, and they have to provide compensation payments to those who come forward in the end. And to be honest with you, I think that's the right thing to do. So this lawsuit was filed by ANST, which is the National Association of Defenders of Children's and Adolescents' Rights. And they said that this service in its current form is not right, and uses harmful advertising that is directly targeted at children and adolescents. And then it went on a bit further and so on and so forth. But in the end, yeah, it's ultimately just a pure gambling mechanic that's being presented to the players. And I don't know. The difference with WoW, in WoW, you spend 15 euros, you know which transmog you're getting, but with these loot boxes, where everything is completely random, those obviously aren't part of it. That's why here in Europe it won't have any impact for now, but let's see how this whole loot box topic in video games develops in general. I can imagine that at some point, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not the day after, but eventually something will definitely happen again. What do you think about it? Is it good that Blizzard was sued and found liable? Not good? Write it in the comments. Thanks for watching, see you in the next video, and take care.